Justice, in its broadest context, includes both the attainment of that which is just and the philosophical discussion of that which is just. The concept of justice is based on numerous fields and many differing viewpoints and perspectives, including the concepts of moral correctness based on law, equity, ethics, rationality, religion, and fairness. Often, the general discussion of justice is divided into the realm of societal justice as found in philosophy, theology and religion, and procedural justice as found in the study and application of the law. The concept of justice differs in every culture. An early theory of justice was set out by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato in his work The Republic. Throughout history, various theories have been established. Advocates of divine command theory argue that justice issues from God. In the 17th century, theorists like John Locke argued for the theory of natural law. Thinkers in the social contract tradition argued that justice is derived from the mutual agreement of everyone concerned. In the 19th century, utilitarian thinkers including John Stuart Mill argued that justice is what has the best consequences. Theories of distributive justice concern what is distributed, between whom they are to be distributed, and what is the proper distribution. Egalitarians argued that justice can only exist within the coordinates of equality. John Rawls used a social contract argument to show that justice, and especially distributive justice, is a form of fairness. Property rights theorists also take a consequentialist view of distributive justice and argue that property rights-based justice maximizes the overall wealth of an economic system. Theories of retributive justice are concerned with punishment for wrongdoing. Restorative justice is an approach to justice that focuses on the needs of victims and offenders. Introductory understandings. Understandings of justice differ in every culture, as cultures are usually dependent upon a shared history, mythology or religion. Each culture's ethics create values which influence the notion of justice. Although there can be found some justice principles that are one and the same in all or most of the cultures, these are insufficient to create a unitary justice apprehension. Harmony. In his dialogue Republic, Plato uses Socrates to argue for justice that covers both the just person and the just city-state. Justice is a proper, harmonious relationship between the warring parts of the person or city. Hence, Plato's definition of justice is that justice is the having and doing of what is one's own. A just man is a man in just the right place, doing his best and giving the precise equivalent of what he has received. This applies both at the individual level and at the universal level. A person's soul has three parts: reason, spirit and desire. Similarly, a city has three parts. Socrates uses the parable of the chariot to illustrate his point. A chariot works as a whole because the two horses' power is directed by the charioteer. Lovers of wisdom, philosophers, in one sense of the term, should rule because only they understand what is good. If one is ill, one goes to a medic rather than a farmer, because the medic is expert in the subject of health. Similarly, one should trust one's city to an expert in the subject of the good, not to a mere politician who tries to gain power by giving people what they want, rather than what's good for them. Socrates uses the parable of the ship to illustrate this point. The unjust city is like a ship in open ocean, crewed by a powerful but drunken captain. A group of untrustworthy advisors who try to manipulate the captain into giving them power over the ship's course. And a navigator who is the only one who knows how to get the ship to port. For Socrates, the only way the ship will reach its destination, the good, is if the navigator takes charge. Divine command. Advocates of divine command theory argue that justice, and indeed the whole of morality, is the authoritative command of God. Murder is wrong and must be punished, for instance, because, and only because, God commands that it be so. Divine command theory was famously questioned by Plato in his dialogue, Euthyphro, called the Euthyphro dilemma. It goes as follows. Is what is morally good commanded by God because it is morally good? Or is it morally good because it is commanded by God? The implication is that if the latter is true, then justice is arbitrary. If the former is true, then morality exists on a higher order than God, who becomes little more than a passer on of moral knowledge. Many apologists have addressed the issue, typically by arguing that is it a false dilemma. For example, some Christian apologists argue that goodness is the very nature of God, and there is necessarily reflected in his commands. Another response, popularized in two contexts by Immanuel Kant and C.S. Lewis, is that it is deductively valid to argue that the existence of an objective morality implies the existence of God and vice versa. Natural law. For advocates of the theory that justice is part of natural law, it involves the system of consequences that naturally derives from any action or choice. In this, it is similar to the laws of physics. In the same way as the third of Newton's laws of motion requires that for every action there must be an equal and opposite reaction, justice requires according individuals or groups what they actually deserve, merit, or are entitled to. Justice, on this account, is a universal and absolute concept. Laws, principles, religions, etc., are merely attempts to codify that concept, sometimes with results that entirely contradict the true nature of justice. Human creation. In contrast to the understandings canvassed so far, justice may be understood as a human creation, rather than a discovery of harmony, divine command, or natural law. This claim can be understood in a number of ways, with the fundamental division being between those who argue that justice is the creation of some humans, and those who argue that it is the creation of all humans. Despotism and Skepticism in Republic by Plato. The character of Thrasymachus argues that justice is the interest of the strong, merely a name for what the powerful or cunning ruler has imposed on the people. Mutual agreement. According to thinkers in the social contract tradition, justice is derived from the mutual agreement of everyone concerned, or, in many versions, from what they would agree to under hypothetical conditions including equality and absence of bias. This account is considered further below, under justice, as fairness. The absence of bias refers to an equal ground for all people concerned in a disagreement. Subordinate value. According to utilitarian thinkers including John Stuart Mill, justice is not as fundamental as we often think. Rather, it is derived from the more basic standard of rightness, consequentialism. What is right is what has the best consequences. So, the proper principles of justice are those that tend to have the best consequences. These rules may turn out to be familiar ones such as keeping contracts, but equally, they may not, depending on the facts about real consequences. Either way, what is important is those consequences, and justice is important, if at all, only as derived from that fundamental standard. Mill tries to explain our mistaken belief that justice is overwhelmingly important by arguing that it derives from two natural human tendencies: our desire to retaliate against those who hurt us, and our ability to put ourselves imaginatively in another's place. So, when we see someone harmed, we project ourselves into her situation and feel a desire to retaliate on her behalf. If this process is the source of our feelings about justice, that ought to undermine our confidence in him. Theories of distributive justice. Theories of distributive justice need to answer three questions. What goods are to be distributed? Is it to be wealth, power, respect, opportunities, or some combination of these things? Between what entities are they to be distributed? Humans, sentient beings, the members of a single society, nations. What is the proper distribution? Equal, meritocratic, according to social status, according to need, based on property rights and non-aggression. Distributive justice theorists generally do not answer questions of who has the right to enforce a particular favored distribution. On the other hand, property rights theorists argue that there is no favored distribution, rather, distribution should be based simply on whatever distribution results from lawful interactions or transactions. This section describes some widely held theories of distributive justice, and their attempts to answer these questions. Social justice. According to the egalitarian, justice can exist only within the parameters of equality. This basic view can be elaborated in many ways, according to what goods are to be distributed, wealth, respect, opportunity, and who or what they are to be distributed equally among individuals, families, nations, races, species. Egalitarian theories are typically less concerned with discussing who exactly will do the distributing or what effects their recommended policies will have on the production of the goods, services, or resources they wish to distribute. Commonly held egalitarian positions include demands for equality of opportunity, though equality of opportunity is often defended by adherents of non-egalitarian conceptions of justice as well. Some variants of egalitarianism affirm that justice without equality is hollow and that equality itself is the highest justice, though such a formulation will have concrete meaning only once the main terms have been fleshed out. At a cultural level, egalitarian theories have developed in sophistication and acceptance during the past 200 years. Among the notable broadly egalitarian philosophies are socialism, libertarianism, and progressivism, which propound economic, political, and legal egalitarianism, respectively. Fairness. In his A Theory of Justice, John Rawls used a social contract argument to show that justice, and especially distributive justice, is a form of fairness, an impartial distribution of goods. Rawls asks us to imagine ourselves behind a veil of ignorance that denies us all knowledge of our personalities, social statuses, moral characters, wealth, talents, and life plans, and then asks what theory of justice we would choose to govern our society when the veil is lifted. If we wanted to do the best that we could for ourselves, we don't know who in particular we are, and therefore can't bias the decision in our own favor. So, the decision in ignorance models fairness, because it excludes selfish bias. Rawls argues that each of us would not reject the utilitarian theory of justice that we should maximize welfare because of the risk that we might turn out to be someone whose own good is sacrificed for greater benefits for others. Instead, we would endorse Rawls' two principles of justice. Each person is to have an equal right to the most extensive total system of equal basic liberties compatible with a similar system of liberty for all. Social and economic inequalities are to be arranged so that they are both to the greatest benefit of the least advantaged, consistent with the just savings principle, and attached to offices and positions open to all under conditions of fair equality of opportunity. This imagined choice justifies these principles as the principles of justice for us, because we would agree to them in a fair decision procedure. Rawls' theory distinguishes two kinds of goods, the good of liberty rights and social and economic goods, i.e., wealth, income and power, and applies different distributions to them. Equality between citizens for equality and less inequality improves the position of the worst off. In one sense, theories of distributive justice may assert that everyone should get what they deserve. Theories disagree on the meaning of what is deserved. The main distinction is between theories that argue the basis of justice ought to be held equally by everyone, and therefore derive egalitarian accounts of distributive justice, and theories that argue the basis of justice is unequally distributed on the basis of, for instance, hard work, and therefore derive accounts of distributive justice by which some should have more than others. According to meritocratic theories, goods, especially wealth and social status, should be distributed to match individual merit. which is usually understood as some combination of talent and hard work. According to needs-based theories, goods, especially such basic goods as food, shelter and medical care, should be distributed to meet individuals' basic needs for them. Marxism can be regarded as a needs-based theory on some readings of Marx's slogan, "From each according to his ability, to each according to his need." According to contribution-based theories, goods should be distributed to match an individual's contribution to the overall social good. Property rights in anarchy, state, and utopia. Robert Nozick argues that distributive justice is not a matter of the whole distribution matching an ideal pattern, but of each individual entitlement having the right kind of history. It is just that a person has some good if and only if they came to have it by a history made up entirely of events of two kinds: just acquisition, especially by working on unowned things, and just transfer, that is free gift, sale or other agreement, but not theft. If the chain of events leading up to the person having something meets this criterion, they are entitled to it. That they possess it is just, and what anyone else does or doesn't have or need is irrelevant. On the basis of this theory of distributive justice, Nozick argues that all attempts to redistribute goods according to an ideal pattern, without the consent of their owners, are theft. In particular, redistributive taxation is theft. Some property rights theorists also take a consequentialist view of distributive justice and argue that property rights-based justice also has the effect of maximizing the overall wealth of an economic system. They explain that voluntary transactions always have a property called Pareto efficiency. The result is that the world is better off in an absolute sense and no one is worse off. Such consequentialist property rights theorists argue that respecting property rights maximizes the number of Pareto-efficient transactions in the world and minimizes the number of non-Pareto-efficient transactions in the world. The result is that the world will have generated the greatest total benefit from the limited, scarce resources available in the world. Further, this will have been accomplished without taking anything away from anyone unlawfully. This may require sacrifice of some for the good of others, so long as everyone's good is taken impartially into account. Utilitarianism, in general, argues that the standard of justification for actions, institutions, or the whole world, is impartial welfare consequentialism, and only indirectly, if at all, to do with rights, property, need, or any other non-utilitarian criterion. These other criteria might be indirectly important, to the extent that human welfare involves them. But even then, such demands as human rights would only be elements in the calculation of overall welfare, not uncrossable barriers to action.